Hi there, welcome. My name is Jake. Welcome to Jake Talks Star Wars, the inaugural episode of my show here, where I, Jake, am going to talk to you guys about Star Wars. So, the first video I wanted to do is kind of like an inaugural video, where I wanted to kind of just tell you a little bit about who I am and why I'm doing this, and a little bit about why Star Wars. So, why do this in the first place? Why not just enjoy Star Wars and just shut up about it? Well, it's kind of a long story. Earlier this year, I decided to start doing more stuff that I was interested in and start doing more stuff that brought me joy. And one of the big things I started to focus on was not waiting to do things any longer because I'm a dad in my mid 30s, and one of the things that I've learned about that and being a dad for the last almost 10 years is you get into this habit of, I'll do whatever later. I'll do it when the kids are older. I'll do it when things settle down at work. I'll do it when things are a little bit more stable or when things are a little bit more normal or whatever. And what I've learned the past few years is that if you keep in that mindset, you're never going to do anything. You're just going to constantly kind of be stuck doing nothing. So I decided that I wanted to start doing things. And one of the things that I kind of fell into was watching Celebration coverage in the spring. I was watching some of my favorite channels cover their experiences at Star Wars Celebration in Tokyo, in Japan. And I was watching it, and it really struck me what a great time everybody was having. And what a unique time this is to be a Star Wars fan, because things are changing so rapidly. I mean, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of Star Wars, right? These movies, these shows, this stuff that's been around for so long, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of it. It's been around that long. So it's really important to not just me, but to millions of people around the world. And I said to myself, I said, wow, that'd be really cool. I would love to go to a celebration. But the next celebration is in Los Angeles. It's in California. I live in Florida. That's literally the other side of the country. And talking to my family, talking to my friends, the one thing that kind of popped up over and over again is you should go. And I thought more about what I told you about in the beginning, this fact that, you're kind of growing up and you keep waiting and you keep waiting and you keep waiting, and eventually you're just never going to do anything. One day you're going to be 70 and you're going to say, wow, I didn't do all that stuff. So I don't want that. So I made the decision in the spring that I am going to Celebration, Star Wars Celebration in Los Angeles, in California, in 2027. And I am stoked. I am super duper excited. And I'm just excited to do it. And in thinking about this, I also kind of said, I want to do something special here. So I decided to start this channel and this series kind of chronicling my road to Celebration, where how I'm going to get there and what I'm going to do and how I'm getting into that zone. So a lot of this is going to be that, where I'm focusing on getting to Celebration. But I also want to talk about Star Wars. I want to talk about Star Wars with all of you, and hopefully with other people eventually, and kind of share this stuff, because I think it's so important and just so valuable for us as not just entertainment, but just in general. So that's a little bit about why. Why Star Wars though? Why am I such a big Star Wars fan? That's tough. That's tough to say. I've been a Star Wars fan as long as I can remember. Nearly as long as I can remember. I remember having some of those action figures, right? I think I have some of them around here somewhere. But those early 90s action figures where everybody was like jacked, right? Where Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Lando, they're all just super buff. Power of the Force, I think was the line. And I remember having some of those action figures, and I remember we had a VHS boxed set of the original Star Wars movies prior to the special editions, the ones with Leonard Maltin interviewing George Lucas at the beginning. I think a lot of you guys probably know what I'm talking about. So I had those VHS tapes, and I had some of those action figures, and Star Wars started to be something I gravitated towards. It started to be something I was really interested in. And I think it really kicked off with seeing the special editions in theaters. When I was a kid, my dad and my mom took me to see the special editions. I saw at least one of them in the theaters. I can't remember if I saw all three, but I know we saw New Hope for sure. And I remember just kind of being captivated by that and how cool it was, because I was kind of caught up in that second wave of, that what Lucas, now I know, looking back, that's what Lucasfilm was doing, was kind of reinvigorating Star Wars right before they released the prequels in a couple of years. But I was kind of caught up in that, and I said, wow, this is really great. This is Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and everybody. This is awesome. I love it. And I really kind of just gravitated towards it. And then as a kid, we moved around a lot. And when we moved to Massachusetts eventually, I had a really tough time making friends. And so I continued to gravitate towards Star Wars. And at that point, we started going to the local library, where I started to gravitate towards not just the movies, but also the books, the expanded universe. Because I kind of said, wow, there's more. There's not just the movies, there's the books. And I started to read a lot of this expanded universe stuff, starting with Shadows of the Empire. That was the first Star Wars book I remember reading, other than kids books. That was the first Star Wars book I remember reading, and I was probably too young to be reading Shadows of the Empire. Honestly, I was probably I was 8 or 9. I was probably way too young, because I had to read it a few times for it to sink in. But and after that, I ended up getting the video game Shadows of the Empire, and that was rad. I loved that game. I played that game like crazy. And then the next game that was really big was, of course, Rogue Squadron for the Nintendo 64. And so that was huge. And at the same time, playing Rogue Squadron, I'm playing Shadows of the Empire, I'm reading these expanded universe books, The Truce at Bakura, and getting into the Timothy Zahn stuff, and some of the other novels, Darksaber, where they had the... or I think it was Darksaber, where they had the faux Death Star that they were building, or they had discovered or something, So a lot of these really kind of off the wall legends story. Now we call them legends stories that were kind of bizarre sometimes, and it was hard to keep up with as a kid, because there's just so much out there, and it's so much hard to keep it straight. And this was before. Well, maybe not before, but this was before I was really internet savvy and was able to figure out what the timeline was and what came first. And so I ended up reading a lot of stuff out of order, which was also confusing. But that all kind of fueled this desire to know more about Star Wars. And then 1999, Phantom Menace hit. And that summer lives in my head like rent free. The fact that we had all of this stuff, all of this, just everything, the movie, the books, the Pepsi cans, the commercials, it was everywhere. There were coloring books, there were games, there was children's books, there was everything, all the stuff. And it lives rent free in my head, this idea that these movies kind of take over the world for a little while every time they're released. That was a huge deal, and I still remember that. And I remember seeing that opening night in a little tiny place called Pittsfield, Massachusetts, because that was the nearest movie theater to where we lived at the time. And I remember my parents took me opening night, and I think I still have my ticket stubs somewhere, but they're probably just totally faded by now. But I think I still have those ticket stubs somewhere. But like I say, they're totally faded. But that movie was incredible, and I only saw it in theaters once, right? Because that, back as a kid, you can only do that kind of stuff once, and it lived in my brain. I ended up reading the novelization like 15 times. I think I was able to get the novelization of Phantom Menace from the library and read it a bunch, and and really from there the rest is history, right? I was way into episode 2 when episode 2 came out. I was all about episode 3 when episode 3 came out. I tried to keep up with the Clone Wars, that original 2D animation Clone Wars series. I was in middle school at the time, so I tried to keep up with that. But I remember specifically using my own money that I got from mowing yards to buy the DVD of the first half of that Clone Wars animation series. I still have that DVD over here, actually. I never bought, the second half because I can't remember ever being able to find it. But I remember specifically using my money, my own money from mowing yards, to buy that DVD of that first half because it was just, I wanted to see it all in one place because it was so hard to find on Cartoon Network at the time. So all that to say, I'm really into Star Wars at this time. I'm watching a lot of Star Wars. I'm kind of steeped in it. But remember, back then, you had the movies and you had the games and that in the books and the comics, and that's pretty much it. And for a kid, and your family doesn't have all the money in the world, getting the comics, getting the books is difficult sometimes. You go to the library, you can get some of it, you can fill in some of the pieces, but it wasn't always easy. But that's kind of where it started for me. And it continued into adulthood, more or less. The rest is, as they say, history. So all that is kind of the foundation of what we're talking about here. But as I grow, right, as I grow older, as I get more educated and go to college and do all the things, you start to look at this stuff differently. The stuff that you enjoyed as a kid, you start to look at it differently. And I started to really see Star Wars in a different light as I grew older. Especially now as I continue to grow older, as a parent also. I see Star Wars today more like modern mythologies, right? If you look in the past, our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, they had mythologies that they looked to. King Arthur, ancient Greeks, Hercules and Achilles and Odysseus and the ancient Greeks and King Arthur and all these knights and fairy tales and everything else. These are all morality stories. These are stories that show us situations and how people react in these situations, how people with moral codes and sometimes different moral codes react in these situations, and they inform and they also inform how we should react, and there's something for us to strive towards in a lot of ways. And I think Star Wars really kind of does that for a modern setting. And this is, I don't think I'm treading any new ground here. I think this is something a lot of people have said, but it's really important to me because, showing these kind of things to my kids, or showing these kind of things to my kids, or things like that, or talking about it with anybody else, these really are morality tales. Like, no, you're not supposed to use your power to dominate and destroy. You're supposed to use your power to protect and preserve, right? And so that's where I think Star Wars is really important for the modern day, to help drive home these kind of morality tales. It's not just space battles. It's not just Jedi and Sith. It's not just good and evil. It's how are we supposed to react to these things that are happening in our world by observing this fictional world. And again, going back to King Arthur, or going back to the ancient Greeks, same thing. How do you react to these events, and how do we expect you to behave based on the people we hold up, based on the stories we tell? So that's kind of my mantra when watching Star Wars, when observing Star Wars, when thinking about Star Wars, is like, what kind of story, what kind of lesson is this giving me? So we'll get more into that in the future. So what are my plans for the channel in general? Like, what do I want this channel to be about? First and foremost, the channel is me talking about Star Wars and me preparing for Celebration in 2 years. There's a lot of stuff going into me preparing for Celebration. Stuff that I'm going to keep close to the chest for now. Stuff that I'm doing for myself. And then, of course, talking about Star Wars and hopefully being able to connect with a bunch of like-minded people here in a couple of years at Celebration in Los Angeles. So I'm very excited for that as well. So that's the main thing. But what am I going to do on the channel? I'm not going to get on here every week and talk about, well, this week I saved a little more money to go to Celebration or whatever. That would be painfully boring. So what I'm hoping to do is do reviews. I want to work my way through the Star Wars catalog as much as I can. At this point, we are spoiled for choice when it comes to Star Wars. I never in my wildest dreams did I think that we would have 9, 10, 11 movies, 11 live-action movies, and Mandalorian, so, all the live-action shows, all the animated shows. I mean, we have hundreds of hours of content at this point of Star Wars, and I never in my wildest dreams growing up thought we'd have this much. So we are spoiled for choice when it comes to Star Wars. But anyway, my point is, what I'm hoping to do is work through the catalog as much as I can to kind of review episodes and review shows and movies and series and offer my thoughts and my opinions and, just share my ideas. Eventually, I would love to do reactions to news, to Star Wars news. And again, I know there's a bunch of people out there that already do that. But I just want to be able to offer my take to reactions and news and things like that eventually as well. And really, what I'd really love to do is not just have me sitting here talking to you as a talking head, because that's, that could get boring. What I'd really love to do eventually as the channel grows is have guests. Have friends or other guests or other people who run their own channels or other even academics. I know there's a lot of academics out there who are big fans of Star Wars who also study Star Wars or use Star Wars in their history writings and in things like this. So I'm hoping to have guests like that on the show eventually to talk about either certain episodes, if they want to come on and talk about certain episodes, or if they want to talk about something different. I would love to do that as well. So that's the plan, guys, and that's my ideas. That's my plan, and that's something I'm really hoping to do for everybody. So for today, thanks for listening. Thanks for coming by. If this sounds like something you're interested in checking out, please subscribe to the channel here at YouTube. Eventually, I might be throwing this on a podcast as well. But please subscribe to the channel here at YouTube. Like the video, share it with your friends. If your friends are interested in this sort of thing, you can also follow me at Instagram and at Threads at Jake _talks _Star Wars _star _wars. Blah. At Jake Talks Star Wars at Instagram and Threads. You can check me out there. I definitely encourage you to do so. Later this week, I am going to share my first review video of Star Wars Rebels. We're going to do episodes 1 and 2, Spark of Rebellion, for Star Wars Rebels, because I want to start on a high note. Star Wars Rebels is probably some of my favorite Star Wars of the last decade and a half or so. It's a great show. If you haven't watched it, you need to. And I'm really excited to talk about it with you guys and share all that with you guys. So thanks for listening today, and thanks for coming by. Thanks for listening. Be safe out there, and may the Force be with you.